Product managers making $400,000. When I tweeted about that yesterday, the most common reply was, "Are you dreaming? What fantasy world do you live in?" But it's just true. In fact,
Yep.
your average IC3, IC4 PM at big tech is making $400,000, especially if you consider the recent stock appreciation of big tech stock. Even if their total compensation was $250,000 on paper 2 years ago, now it's worth $400,000. And that's just at the lower levels of product management. When you get to the level like our guest today, Alex of Group PM, the types of stats you see are pretty mind-boggling. You see a lot of seven-figure compensation packages for PMs at Google, at NVIDIA, all sorts of these hot tech companies. So that's what we're here to break down today. And I'm really excited to have Alex here. Alex, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. Well, I'm Alex Rachevsky. Thank you very much, Aakash, for having me on here. I help people break into top tech PM roles. Sometimes people can be working for a long time, have great careers, but have not had a chance to actually get into those big tech companies that you're talking about. So sometimes there is a disconnect between an understanding of what appropriate compensation is for a PM, even like, across geographies in the US or even in top geographies like San Francisco and so on. But yes, you're right. In top tech, the biggest companies, the big 20, 50 top tech companies, public ones, the compensation level is kind of extraordinary. And everything you said is true. And I think first, we need to let people know about it. Second, help people actually make the jump there.
Awesome. So for people who are just incredulous, what do you think is really driving that trimodal distribution, as Gurgly or Rose talks about, where you'll have people with the same title, some might be earning 150K, some 250K, and then these others earning 400K, just to use sort of like the base IC levels. What's driving that?
You've got these big tech companies that have access to millions and billions of users. The distribution is like one company servicing hundreds of millions or billions of users. You're going to get a lot of value in that one entity. And the PMs and the engineers are the ones that primarily build a lot of the software that's involved to kind of drive that value. There's value that's created for users, of course, all across the world, but a lot of that value is brought back to the organization. As you know, Google, Facebook, they generate primarily, majority of their revenue, I think like 83 and 97% respectively, from advertising. So that means they take back quite a bit of that value back from the users in one way or another. And then there's just tremendous revenue, tremendous profits to go around. And there's only that many people that are needed to build those products at scale and to have the reach throughout hundreds of millions of people across the world. And I think basically that's how you get that value that can go towards relatively few people. And I think that you can have a product manager at Google or Facebook that builds a product that reaches hundreds of millions of users, and therefore that one person could have a really outsized impact. And that's really, I think, the crux of it.
Yeah. So I think that some people sometimes have a mistaken sort of view of big tech where they think that like Gmail or Google Maps has like thousands and thousands of PMs. But how many PMs are actually in those orgs, and what is sort of the scope of an average PM?
Right, exactly. So that is incorrect. You usually have a ratio of like anywhere from 20 engineers to 1 PM to 60, 70 engineers to 1 PM, depending on the scope. So you've got levels that are, let's say, typical, like Google or Meta levels that you might be familiar with, or viewers or listeners might be familiar with: L4, L5, L6, L7. So L4 is usually like a feature PM. L5 will be a PM that maybe is running a bigger part of a product, or perhaps even an entire product line. L6, the senior PM, you could already have some reports by that time, depending on the type of company. So therefore, you might be responsible for a bigger product in general. And L7, group principal level, is typically the highest IC, individual contributor, role at these tech companies, where usually you might have 3, 5, 6, 8 sometimes 10 reports, depending on the intensity of the effort and the reduction of the work-life balance. But if you're running 6, 7, 8, 9 other PMs, you might already own really big products or an entire product line. So you might be running like a big part of Google Maps, let's say like consumer platform. With a product like Google Maps, perhaps you have actually multiple directors or product managers that own the whole thing, and then it rolls up into a VP level of ownership that goes beyond Google Maps, like multiple products of the size of Google Maps. But at the end of the day, yeah, you'll have like an L4 PM working on a bunch of different features inside Google Maps that might roll out and hit tens of millions or hundreds of millions of users. And it's one PM with usually a lot of engineers involved, of course, and there's a ton of other cross-functional folks. Obviously, I don't mean to belittle everybody else's impact. It's obviously very much a team effort. I'm not just saying that. Honestly, there would be nothing to do. If it was just engineers and PMs would really not be necessary. The engineers would just do everything. But because there's a lot of other things to be done, you have to think about, of course, the business best interest, of course, the user's best interest, and how to run this whole thing, how to run these projects. It ends up PMs that are mainly in charge, or rather, it falls upon them to be driving these products forward.
They do actually have like a pretty wide sort of aperture. As Alex mentioned, like maybe like 10 reports own all of Google Maps consumer, and Google Maps is a product that like 2 billion people use. So you can have like a pretty large impact as a single PM in big tech, because you end up shipping big features. It's not like, oh, you're shipping, everyone talks about like how Google tests like the 10 different colors of, the search button in the Marissa Mayer era. That's actually not like something that maybe even like a PM will be super involved in. PMs will be involved in like much bigger, more impactful features. Like Google Maps is now going to create the ability for people to add in restaurant reviews. That was a huge feature that once happened. Like those would be the types of scope of features that people are shipping. So they're shipping features that affect billions of people, and that's why they make this compensation. And also why the path to breaking into these roles really depends on the background that you have. So let's talk about that now. Like you've written about how landing a $700,000 product management role, you need to think about having basically a certain checkpoints in your background. How would you describe those?
To get into the really high-paid world, there's a couple of great filters that really you need to pass. The most frustrating one of these is to have recognizable names on your resume. This is the most frustrating one because it feels like we have kind of very limited control over this one. And it's certainly true, especially as you're starting out. So my advice to people that are starting out is know that this is what you need to have. You need to have more and more recognizable names on your resume. And this should not be a surprise. We've been doing things this way for, hundreds of years, like since the rise of higher education. Like we've been putting on big name universities as a way of cutting through the noise. And it's just a filtering heuristics for humans when you're dealing with a whole bunch of information. And if you are in the hiring manager's shoes, you do the same. You kind of fall back on these heuristics. So in order to get into the top tech companies, you're going to need recognizable names. Just accept it. That's step one. The second thing is, if you want to have access to most of the opportunities, geography becomes another very painful filtering. And this one hurts quite a bit because probably we should actually, this is a good one for us to look into, Aakash, on another whole deep dive. But like, where are the PM roles for tech jobs? I would say 50% of them are in San Francisco, Seattle, New York, maybe like a few select places in Europe, like Zurich is one where a lot of the tech companies are. And then everything else is like spread probably into like a long tail. This is my guess. an educated guess because I've done these snapshots where I go on LinkedIn, I see, okay, what's available in San Francisco, Seattle, New York, and then everywhere else. I check out, 10 of the data points. It would be good to do a comprehensive look, but for now, suffice it to say that if you want to make movies, you should probably move to Hollywood. If you want to work in top tech and make a lot of money as a PM, probably San Francisco, Seattle would be the top choices. That one's a painful. Then there are a bunch of less painful filters because we can control these a little bit more. Like these are down to our skills, the type of work that we do, the type of impact that we drive, and our ability to, of course, communicate with others and pass the interviews, right, to actually get in.
Yep. And I think that another thing that probably a lot of people miss that you put in this table that I like is just confidence and years of experience. So you'll notice that in big tech, the average PM that you talk to, you can just bump into them in the middle of San Francisco and they'll be polished. It's not like they're suddenly caught off guard by anything. Like these are highly confident, highly accomplished people. And you notice that they build that confidence from actual experience. Like on average, I think your average product manager or senior product manager at a startup might only have 3 to 5 years of experience. In big tech, you're going to see that number be much higher. So I like that how in this table you put 6+ years of experience. How would you roughly graphed those levels that you just explained to us to like years of experience?
Yeah, years of experience is an interesting one because sometimes people tell me that like 6 years is not enough to be making $700,000 to $800,000, and generally it's true, but also years of experience themselves don't really translate directly. There's maybe a correlational relationship between like how good you are and years of experience, but really only to a certain degree. I would say it's years of experience coupled with the skills that you've picked up and the impact that you've had that we need. So if you've only worked for 2-3 years, but you've already been able to get to high numbers in usage, high numbers in revenue, or high numbers in another important metric, that's going to substitute for a lot when someone's reviewing your resume. But if you're applying for a top tech role that's a decent, reasonably high level, L6, L7, your impact alone won't be enough also, because if you just have 3-4 years experience, they might just skip your resume entirely. So it needs to be the combination of these things. It's not, when I say 6+, when you're trying to target these high paid role, I say that's really like a minimum. I hope you have 6+ good years where you've learned stuff, you've been able to deliver impact. But certainly if you have 8, 10, 15, 20, just as good, arguably a lot better. So it's sort of like this just really minimum requirement where beyond which I think it would be difficult to seriously suggest that you're going for a group PM role at Google.
Yep. And then I think the last element of this table that people should be aware of is like who you communicate with. So in the stories that you're choosing once you finally get to the interview at these big tech companies, if you're only influencing your direct designer and engineer, then you don't really have that multi-level stakeholder. And if you're only doing design and engineering, then you don't really have that cross-functional. So they're really looking for like people above your level in product analytics, in user research, in sales, in marketing, operations. They're looking for you to have like caught the eye of that senior director in ops or things like that. And so I think that those are what round out like kind of the minimum requirements for these jobs. So I want to now move into the mindset. This was something really interesting you mentioned in our pre-interview, which is that you need to have the right mindset towards getting towards this $700,000 job. And you coach, 80+ people in the Product Career Accelerator on this. What are the sort of bad mindsets and good mindsets that you should have towards getting this job?
It depends. I think it's a good question. It depends on where you are right now. So people that are early career, I want them to develop a proactive approach to this. This is not something for you to target tomorrow if you're just starting out. For instance, that biggest gap, like when you have no recognizable names to getting some recognizable names, you're going to have to hustle. your way into those positions. And there's methodologies that we can use to do that, and we do work on that in Product Career Accelerator. But a lot, like majority of that challenge is still going to be on you to do that. If you approach it with the perspective of I'm going to go for the interview right now, I'm going to get it from the first try, good to go. If not, it's not for me. That's not an appropriate mindset. The pass rate at these interviews is extremely low. I think you'll have better luck getting into Harvard. And for those that have gotten into Harvard, you still will have an entirely different way that you have to get through these interviews. And there's enough content out there about these interviews that you know it's a combination of understanding the methodologies, but also practice and understanding how to actually get through different types of questions. So if you're early career, I would strongly recommend taking a long-term view on your career. You could do the, whatever falls into your lap, and a lot of us work that way. And frankly, I worked that way at the beginning as well. But if you take an early view and you understand, look, this is where the compensations are, in the next 5-10 years, I don't think there's going to be a big sea change and the way to check my logic on that is just look at the software that you use on any given day and imagine the likelihood of you not using those things in the next 5 to 10 years. Like, of course, there is a likelihood, but it's relatively low. So there's nothing that's going to change in the fundamental supply and demand of the way that these services and this software gets to you over the next 5 to 10 years, that these compensation numbers might be changed. So some people might be thinking, it's a fluke. It's going to change. Maybe, but it's been going on for, 15, 20 years. And again, I'm not trying to predict the far future, but the next 5, 10 years, I think you've got a good target if you want to do that. So you take a long-term approach. Beef up your resume over multiple years. Work on projects that give you the impact that these hiring managers and recruiters will need. Work on your interview skills, first elementary, then more advanced stuff, etc. And try multiple times and get bigger and bigger companies on your resume and under your belt. Fill in those experience gaps, build up that confidence so that eventually you can get the $600,000, $700,000, $800,000, $900,000 compensation. But if you're already there, and I have a lot of folks like that reach out. It's like, I've been working for 10 years. I have all kinds of useful stuff that I've learned. I've worked with millions of users, millions of dollars. I don't have the big tech companies, but I have other recognizable names. How do I make the jump? There, it's about investing significant time on a long-term basis, so like a consistent basis, not for 1 day or 1 week. I recommend in the Product Career Accelerator, our baseline, we start at 3 months. So I want you to be basically ready to work for 3 months, about an hour or so a day, 5-6 days a week. And you do that on a consistent basis so that you get to a point where you internalize some of the stuff. Get to that level that you're talking about where like you meet someone on the street and it's a top PM and they're ready to go. They're ready to have the conversation at a high level immediately. You need to get to that level of internalization so that you can go and interview the top 10, 20 tech companies, take the barrage of questions that they have from product design, business strategy, analytical, execution, behavioral, all those, enjoy them, deliver answers within the time frame, and actually try to have a good time during it. Only then can you expect to get really the multiple offers and the high compensation that we expect. Anything else like this mindset of, you know what, I've got interviews coming up in 2 weeks with Meta. Let me watch a couple of YouTube videos. Alex has some good videos. Aakash has some good videos. That'll be enough. It's not enough is what I'm finding.
Cool. So you already went into a little bit, but let's get into a very specific case now. So this is like the first archetype of person who's probably going after this job, which is a student. And the way I've traditionally guided students is there's, maybe 3 paths that are most effective to landing one of these roles. And I'm curious on your feedback. So the first is start with as technical of a major as you can, and even stuff in a technical minor if you can. So I have a lot of people come to me like they've just finished their junior year. They had a consulting internship and they hated it. They now want to move on to product management because it's the second sexiest thing on campus. And I always tell them, like, can you finish a computer science minor in your senior year? Because that's really, really important to be able to understand the technical side of things. Or alternatively, maybe even product design. So it's like either engineering or design. You really want expertise in that. The second thing I tell people is think about your targeting. You basically can either get into an APM program at these top 20 tech companies we're talking about, or the long-term approach that you mentioned, which might be that you jump into a startup now, you build your 6 years of PM experience, and then you transition into big tech. So you need to think about your paths and then tailor accordingly. And then the third thing I tell students is like, you're so lucky, like you're a student now, like give an honest inventory of the PM skills that you do and don't have. Do you understand income statements and financial metrics? If not, take those classes. Do you understand the ins and outs of APIs and how to use them? If not, take those classes. Do you understand what the double diamond framework is? If not, take those classes. So I think that that's my general advice. How would you enhance that, and what have you learned kind of coaching students?
I love that. That's super comprehensive. And I've been primarily focused on folks that are on the other side of the spectrum. So we'll probably spend some time talking about those. But, over the last 5 years, I've spoken to a ton of students and people early in the career trying to figure things out. And my general advice is first addressing your question on or your recommendation on technical. There's basically, I guess there's three things. There's technical understanding, there's business fundamentals, and then there's the design and user experience. Those are the three things that fundamental things that you should know. Of course, that doesn't mean you have to be technical, you have to be a master programmer or anything like that. But I would tend to agree. Gosh, I would say if you have a choice, go with something technical, because it's going to be good to be in that environment and sort of get that out of the way especially if you're not intrinsically technical. It's going to be harder for you to force yourself to pick up all the stuff that you need later when you're outside of that environment. So I would say if you're at all mathematically inclined and you want to go towards product management, picking up a technical degree is definitely a good idea. My favorite combination is technical degree, some sort of business, either your own experience as a business person, entrepreneur, or MBA or equivalent. Even though I generally don't recommend people pick up MBA specifically for the PM role, but when I meet people that have that background, it tends to be a classical PM background, technical plus business. On the user experience stuff, interviewers don't look for that much. It's super useful in the work itself. During the interview itself, it is probably kind of on a tier below the technical and the business stuff. Technical is supreme, business is second, design is third. That's how I would rank it. In terms of also, I would say consulting is better than product management. In what world? I don't agree with that. So I think product management is definitely better than consulting, although they're very, very similar. And I have a lot of consultants that go and switch into product. And I would say that if you're primarily going into consulting for the prestigious name, fine. For the compensation, okay, but the point of this conversation is to show you that there's actually quite a bit of compensation, arguably more, that is available to the top tech PMs as well. So, but in terms of your recommendation to students, that's how I would start. I would also add to build stuff yourself. Like, I cannot overstate the importance of this, not understate. Building stuff yourself is the best experience that you have. I don't care if it's just a product for yourself to solve a tiny little pain point that you have, a better calendar extension, like a better way to manage your email, or like to track your morning walks. It doesn't matter what, but get into the habit of building stuff. You should do that early on. Don't be like a career product manager who has never launched anything on their own, but it constantly is like, okay, I'm working here, I'm working for startup, I'm working for big tech, I'm doing MBA. Like having that entrepreneurial experience, especially early on when you don't have a lot of responsibilities and you have a lot of time, I just cannot overstate the importance of this. But at the same time, like I said, it doesn't matter what you're actually building. It can be minute. You can have one customer, you can have 10 customers, your friends and family, or some friends online. So long as people are finding value and you're learning to make better stuff, it's going to be something you can put on your resume. It's going to be something that's going to make you a better PM. And I think it's just great for a long-term career view.
Cool. Yeah, let's move more specifically into those mid-career PMs now. So We're going to go into career switchers and non-MAANG PMs in a second, but specifically for like a mid-career PM. So let's think about somebody who, has like 2 to 3 years PM experience. You've thrown out a couple things that they might consider, like MBA potentially, but not specifically for PM, building their own startup and being the founder. What are some of the key tactics that you typically recommend? Another interesting one that you posted about on LinkedIn was just switching your jobs, like switching into better companies or higher paying companies just to get those higher brand names. What is sort of like the high level meta for mid-career PMs?
Yeah, I like that. I like that framing. First thing, the MBA route. If you can have a company sponsor an MBA part-time or MBA on the side or something like that, that's actually a good way to go. I did a recent survey where I asked our PMs who has MBAs, who doesn't, and who's found it useful in any way and who doesn't. And I think roughly about a third have MBAs, and then from those, about half think that it did not help them in their career at all. So something like that. I'll share the specifics in the next couple of weeks about like what the survey results, but there's some caveats. But in general, like that's the direction. So there's some benefit, and if you don't have a business background, if you don't have an entrepreneurial background, it's a good way to fill the gap and really give you some stuff that at least gives you a foundation to then leverage and really shock everybody at the company with your incredible profit and loss work, or your incredible assessment of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, or just your 2x2s. Really, I mean, it's actually kind of staggering, like how little of the stuff that you learn it takes to impress and have an impact. So you don't actually need a lot of that stuff, but some stuff, especially if you don't have any background, is going to be useful. So I'd say that's one meta play you could do. Hey, have the company sort of sponsor your way into it on the side. The second thing is you try to pick up slightly bigger companies, and not bigger, more recognizable. You're specifically saying, hey, roughly how recognizable is this company? Is it going to get me any points when a recruiter picks up my resume? If not, can I see if I can make a jump? You should try to kind of aim for every 2 to 3 years or so. If you do it more frequently than that, then it looks like you're kind of job hopping. But at the same time, I would not really stay much longer than that unless you have clear additional impact that you're getting, or clear additional compensation, or something very specific. And it's even like a promotion is not quite enough for me, because again, what's your long-term plan? Your long-term plan, have huge impact, make a huge compensation. And how is an internal promotion really helping you do that? Not really. It's sort of like a little bit of a carrot for internal people to stay. You have to set aside all these notions a little bit and think for yourself, like optimize for yourself, not just the company. A company could let you go at any moment, give you a couple weeks notice, give you a little packet, and then off you go. They'll never think about you again. So don't like hyper optimize for performance for the company. And people don't do this. They like get excited about titles change internally, and then they stay in the company 5 years. I've seen some Googlers, now it's a different story, that have stayed for like 15 years. Now, if they got a good comp package early on with heavy equity, okay, maybe it makes sense. But I bet you, they have not gotten good refreshers during those 15 years because they've just sort of been going with the flow. And then when you leave Google after 15 years into like a brave new world, you don't really know what's going on. It's going to be quite an adjustment, quite a shock. So I think that's the second strategy, is move around to get more recognizable names and to get more meaningful impact and to stay on target. And then I think that in general, like if this could be a good time to pick up some of that on the side entrepreneurial background. If you don't go the MBA route and you don't switch companies and you're staying at your company, then do some stuff on the side so you can put, hey, I built this thing on the side on your resume also. Again, we're always thinking about how do we actually get improved rating, so to speak, in front of that recruiter. Cool. My kids, by the way, are making all kinds of noise in the background, so I don't know. Hopefully that's not coming through. I apologize to all the listeners.
Not yet. Mine were too, like 10 minutes ago when I muted myself. So career switchers now. So And specifically, let's take the hat of somebody who is working in a top 20 to 50 tech company. So potentially I'm working in product marketing or design. Potentially I'm working in user research. I'm noticing that the PM function is kind of paid a lot better than me. I'm thinking about making the switch. I'd like to even potentially make it without dropping a level. Is it possible to do it without dropping a level? And what are sort of the best ways for those career switchers to think about it?
Great question. So while I was at Google, I've had product marketing people, sales people, EGMs, support folks all transferred to the PM ladder. And I love to help people that want to break into product management because it usually means that I can take on some headcount, so to speak. So there's some like interesting ways you can actually get a huge team by just helping people break into product. Now, obviously, they have to know the product, they have to have the necessary skills, and it's more administrative work for you. But this is actually one way that I recommend people level up. Like I've built a team of 3 or 4 people without having any headcount. And so you could definitely do that as well. But for those folks, I would say it's worth it to switch levels if you truly love the work. Like if you're just doing it for the money, then I don't know if it's necessarily worth it to switch that level because you're setting yourself back a couple of years. But I think that if you do enjoy the work and you want to have really more from the strategic perspective, more from the user customer focus, then it's worth it to even take a step down a level because it's less responsibility, sometimes more money right away, and you get to be an actual product manager in that big tech company. And I've seen some of my own clients or members of the PCA, Product Career Accelerator, who have plenty of big tech experience but don't have the proper product manager name struggle. Because then if you're trying to break into product management from there in another company, they're going to say, okay, but you were a program manager, you're something else, a salesperson. Like it's a different thing. Your company name got my attention, so I looked at your resume, but once I looked at it, I see there's no product manager on it. So if you're in, you can make a switch. You can even get a year of product management work, whether it's rotation, whether it's 20% work, however you can, you just get yourself product manager role at Google or Salesforce or Netflix or wherever you are at. That's going to be huge for you. And then you can make the switch out of the company. You leave it on good terms so you can actually come back. But then you come back in a higher level. Let's say you're L5, you switch to, you get an L4 product management role, but at Google, work there for a year, go apply to a different company. Now the road is open to Meta or anywhere else because you were a product manager. You have your big tech experience that counts for however many years you were there, and you have the title of product manager. So now recruiters will talk to you, and you can hopefully package, and that's what we do in the accelerator also, is we package the work that you've done into product management rubric. Then you can have the conversations with recruiter, crush the interviews. You still got to crush the interviews, no way around that. Then all of a sudden you now have an L5 or even an L6 role at something like a Meta. And from there, that's it. You've made a huge switch. It didn't really cost you anything. So this is like an optimal path. If you're inside, it's going to be painful. Make the switch, make the rotation, get the product manager role, then get high ratings in your was it twice a year, the grad, your performance reviews, and then leave. Go work somewhere else as a product manager, even if it's a step down. Then you can come back to Google or Meta on a higher level just by nailing the interviews. Because in the interview, there's certain things you can do to get a higher level. There's a lot of different frameworks. Like I teach 4 different approaches to the behavioral question. You can answer it L4, L5, L6, or L7. Choose your own adventure, which way you want to go. So that's the path for those folks.
Cool. Awesome. So let's keep moving since we're almost out of time here. What is the high level meta, kind of briefly, for your non-top 50 tech PM? So I hear this complaint a lot, which is that I basically have the bad company curse. I've spent 12 years in PM. I've worked at 6 companies that you haven't heard of, and I just can't break into a company that people have heard of. What have been the most effective things for you? I feel like, the tactics or the meta that I most focus on for people is their former network, because usually they have designers and engineers who have since broken into big tech, and those people can make really good referrals. And then usually these people can actually do pretty well in the interviews with some coaching. So that's like one thing I tend to recommend to people. Another thing I tend to recommend to these non-Maang people is, how do you create specific collaboration with that company? So I've noticed a lot of people who want to break into like Apple PM, they'll ship like the company's first iOS app, and that will make Apple pretty interested, because they'll say, oh, you have expertise in our operating system. I'm curious like how you would recommend those non-Maang PMs to break in.
I love that. That second methodology. I was going to start out with effectively increasing the amount of time that you spend with networking. You make that your P0. Now, every day, that's what you do first. The work you do second, or obviously family first, or whatever your priorities are. Your P0 from a professional perspective has to be networking, because you've got 10, 12 years experience. Assuming you have no recognizable tech names, your problem is you can't get in. You just can't get an invite to the interview. You need to increase your network. You need to work on the referrals. You need to start meeting people. I love that idea of thinking back about who you worked with in the last 10 years and then seeing where have they gone. They might have gone to different places. Ping them. It's totally okay to have those conversations. Obviously, I like to approach networking with drive value for the other person first, then ask for stuff. That's a separate conversation entirely. But let's just say networking is the name of the game, because I have people inside the accelerator that are just master networkers, and just they know how important networking is, and they have an in every company. If you've done 10 years for a company that nobody knows, unfortunately, it's back to networking and trying to get another way in that way. And then the second thing that you recommend, a big +1 to that. But it's sort of like it's got a networking component built into it, because you're like, as a matter of fact, I'm building out this iOS app, or I'm using this new VR experience, and I have some contacts in the company now, and we sort of have a professional relationship, and that's another angle for your networking and referral path.
Awesome. So we're at the lightning round here. We just have 3 more questions that we're going to go through really fast. So you've written a lot about how, and you've talked a little bit right now about how the way you interview needs to be sort of adapted to the level you're targeting or the type of big tech role you're targeting. So how do people, what is like the right way to do this? Do you just set up a bunch of mock interviews with different people? What are sort of the things that like tactically people are doing to get better at these interviews?
Yeah, so there's about 20 or 30% are the fundamentals, the tactics, the frameworks, and about 70 to 80% is execution, as almost with everything else. So the best way that I know how to do that is to make sure you understand the frameworks and the fundamentals, and then have plenty of opportunities to actually test your understanding and test those in the field. The key is to test those against people that are well calibrated and understand what's actually happening versus just your buddies.
Amazing. Well, we're out of time. Thank you so much, Alex, for sharing your insights. The rest of the tactics expanded upon from the strategies we've covered are in the deep dive, so that goes much deeper into all of this. If you're interested, do like, comment, and subscribe for the algorithm, and we'll see you in the next one.
Thanks, Aakash. Take care.